Just want to do a little rant about virtually rotating magnetic fields and the possibilities. Now, I think this is how Clement Figuera, the Holcomb machine, probably other ones, Pierre sees virtual rotating magnetic fields. Now, this is all fact that I'm going to say here. So, real world examples, not too much theory. Then we'll say some theory. Okay, a car alternator. You have a 12-volt battery that powers the rotor with a bunch of coils on it. It creates magnetic fields. Okay, usually these are about 5 to 8 ohm. Let's just say 5 ohm to overestimate it. So you're talking about 2.6, 2.4, in between 2 to 3 amps of current at 12 volts going into this, roughly. Right now, when this rotates, the engine of the car rotates this thing, right, and it creates electricity out of the stator. Okay, and the stator produces many, 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 many more times power than it took to power the rotor, or to initiate the magnetic field, to keep the magnetic field here. So this produces a buttload more energy than it takes to sustain the magnetic field. So much so that you could start a car and get the alternator going. Then you could remove the battery from the car and the car will still run. So the coil produces enough to power this, and the coil produces enough to run the lights, the horn, all the computers in the car, the resistance in the car, and all that other crap. This coil is producing all of that from a smaller amount because of the rotation. Okay, so the rotor spins inside the stator. The stator produces enough current to charge the battery really quick and enough energy to sustain the magnetic field that's creating it. Okay, and there's a testament of this is in every single car out there that uses a standard alternator. Sure, there's ones with permanent magnets, but those are different procedure because then it's a little more difficult because you need the physical rotation. But anyway, now the whole concept is the rotation of the engine is is where the power is coming from. The rotation of the engine, because it's rotating the magnetic fields. The rotating magnetic fields is what's causing it. Okay, so on average, this might take 2 to 5 amps at 12 volts, and this thing is going to put out, I don't know, anywhere from 40 to 90, 40 to 120 amps. You're talking 10, 20 times the power output than it took to power the magnetic field. Okay. Now, instead of rotating it with an engine, what if you could design a little circuit that uses, takes half the energy in resistance, and half the energy, or a little bit of the energy in mechanical switching, or transistors or MOSFETs and switching, and you created a circumstance where you could rotate these magnetic fields. This is configured a little differently, but you could get rotating magnetic fields in this stator, in this rotor, without rotation, without physically rotating anything. Sure, it might cost just as much as it does to power the coil, even if it costs 5 times more than it costs just to power the coil. You could be getting 10 to 20 times out. So this is where the whole virtually rotating magnetic fields comes into play. How do you take coils, a bunch of separate coils, and power them so one is declining while the other one's growing, the net one's declining as the next one's growing, and flipping polarity like a magnet going around? How would you configure that? If you could configure that and figure out a little circuit or a little rhyme or reason like Clemente Figuera did and other ones, if you could figure that out, then you could you could take away the mechanics and you could take away the physical rotation, and you could create the same effect with virtual rotation. Now there's no big horsepower and gasoline and massive power needed to spin that rotor because it's being done for a fraction of the cost. So that's generally why I'm spending so much time with this, because it seems absolutely reasonable that this can do what we seek if we could figure out the correct configuration and how to design the virtual rotation.